So, good afternoon to all of you. Myself, Amit Sinha, and I have been teaching in this field of civil service examination for last more than 10 years. I have been a graduate and a postgraduate from Delhi University in history honors, and I did it in 2001 and 3, and then afterwards I wrote my civil service examination, where I qualified for 3 times interview in IAS examination in 2007, 2008 and 2010. I appeared for the interview in UPSC. And then of course I have been teaching various subjects of GS, and since history has happened to be one of my subjects of passion, so since then, the days when I started of course pursuing history in 1998 in Delhi University, since then till today I have been quite a very, you can say, eager learner of history in fact. Now coming back to this issue, so I will be taking up history over here, history for both optional and GS papers, and I have guided, in fact I have mentored, I have taught, I would say, hundreds of successful candidates till now. So that's what actually has been my credential, to make you understand that whatever I will be discussing with all of you would be going to be highly relevant from both the perspectives. So history. So history I will be teaching with for all of you in fact here on the platform of Mobishaala, and that particular subject of history would be relevant for both the kind of students who are actually a part of the optional paper of history, or who are going to be a part of also the GS paper of history in fact. So in both the ways it is going to be relevant from the UPSC perspective, and it is equally going to be relevant from the perspectives of various state public service examinations, such as the Bihar Public Service Commission examination, that is BPSC, UP PCS and other state PCS examinations. I have also appeared for UP PCS and BPSC mains. All right, so I have a fair idea also about that kind of questions what are being framed over there as well. So therefore, let me explain to you that in history we will be trying to cover first the syllabus which are common to all these examinations in fact. All right, that is of course it will include the syllabus of IAS or UPSC exam, and then it is also going to include a syllabus of the state specific exams including BPSC and other PCS exams in India. Fine, that is going to be the course of action in history for all of you. My classes would be primarily in English medium only, because I have been teaching in English medium for last more than a decade in fact, I would say like this way. So therefore it will be mainly in English only here in Mobishaala. All right. So coming back to this issue, that how history has to be understood and what all contents are to be studied in history. So I'm going to make you understand the syllabus first, and then I'll come to the issue that how to approach those syllabus of history. See, as far as history is concerned, I hope if you have gone through the syllabus, then it's all right. Otherwise, let me explain to you that what all things are to be studied in history as an optional and both in the GS paper. So optional and as well as the GS paper. Now let me tell you one thing, that in GS paper you have paper 1 where you are supposed to study history and culture part. Fine. In optional you have the very elaborative syllabus of history, and according to my opinion, that out of the entire syllabus of the different subjects of UPSC, in fact, history happens to be the most vast syllabus. In fact, I would say the most vast, biggest syllabus as far as the entire subjects syllabus of UPSC are concerned. So, coming back to this issue, that what all things I was supposed to study in optional paper of history. See, in optional there are certain things which are common, and GS also, which are going to be common in fact. So, see, the syllabus of optional and GS are both going to be common here in the context of that we are supposed to study history from ancient Indian perspective, fine, medieval India, all right, then also the modern India. Fine, that is the three very common things which are going to be also applied here. So, here I go again, we are going to study all these things. Now, in optional we are also supposed to study the history of post modern, that is post independence period history, that is equally a part of our syllabus, all right. Then also we have to study the syllabus of world history, that is equally a part of our syllabus, fine. So, even the world history is equally a part of the syllabus of your optional paper, all right. Now, coming to this particular part, of course, these are also common. So, you can see, I mean, if I have to elaborate the paper 1 of optional, that is there are two papers of optional, paper 2 and paper 1. Now, in paper 1, it consists of these two particular aspects of the syllabus, that is ancient and medieval part. In paper 2, it is including modern, post-independence and even the world history part. Alright, so that is a part of your paper 2 syllabus, fine, that is there in optional paper, fine. Now, in GS, of course, in GS paper 1, you have various components like history and culture is one component. All right, it also consists of the component of social issues, fine. It also includes the component of the geography as well. So, that is how GS paper 1 is designed as, and of course, this particular segment is the segment of your history in GS paper 1 also. So, in nutshell, I mean, all these 5 areas are equally a part of your syllabus here as well, all right. But there are certain you can say reasonable restrictions here in this particular history and culture part of your GS paper. What is that? Of course, syllabus is very specifically designed, very specifically mentioning about that we have to emphasize more upon the modern Indian syllabus of history, especially giving emphasis to freedom struggle part. So, freedom struggle part is going to be the most important part of your syllabus in history in that way, and then the art and culture is going to be the another most important part of your syllabus. And when you study art and culture, automatically you are supposed to study even the ancient and medieval part in that syllabus. So, ancient plus medieval will be studied in the context of art and culture part only in our syllabus, fine. There is one in fact very specific part which are mentioned in the syllabus. Apart from this, it also mentions about world history syllabus, and this world history syllabus is very specifically mentioned that the episode from the 18th century. So, it means that from 18th century onwards, whatever has happened in world history, that is a part of the syllabus of history and culture in GS paper, fine. So, that is one very specific aspect that has given us some idea that where to keep our focus when we go through the syllabus of history in GS paper. So, world history is very specifically mentioning about the episodes 18th century onwards, alright, that is how we have to study till the disintegration of the USSR or till the, you can say, the end of the Cold War era. That is actually the part of our syllabus here in that way, fine, that is syllabus of world history. Then we have also syllabus of post-independence part. So, post-independence period, that is post-independence consolidation and reorganization of India. That is equally a part of our syllabus there in your GS paper 1, fine. So, see, these are things which are common, alright, which are common in both the particular papers. So, in GS paper 1, these things are to be focused upon. In optional paper, these things are to be focused upon, but in optional, the focus would be more elaborate, more penetrative, and mostly, in fact, I would say, in the context of understanding the nitty-gritties of the subject of history. That is how we have to understand history in optional paper. Fine. So, this is exactly what is your syllabus. Fine. So, in that way, you have to understand that syllabus has to be referred in this particular manner only, isn't it? So, ancient, medieval, modern, and then you have post independence and world history part of your syllabus. That is how we have to understand the syllabus. Fine. Coming back to this optional paper, especially in the context of that ancient and medieval India. Now, this is a part of your paper 1 of your optional paper of history. Fine. Now, here in terms of the questions, see, in terms of questions, you are supposed to answer at least 5 questions, and in UPSC what they have done, they have started asking you in every question 3 sub questions. So, suppose question number 1. So, in question number 1 there would be 3 sub part of that question. In other words, that in question number 1 only you have questions like A, B and C, and that has to be written by all of you. So, exactly you will be having the option in all those questions, but you are supposed to at least attempt 5 out of the total 8 questions that is asked there in the your optional paper, each of your optional paper in that way. And especially in both the papers like paper 1 and paper 2, the very first question is always compulsory. For example, in in optional paper 1, you have the content from ancient and medieval, but the mapping question, the questions are also asked for maps, all right, that you have to also locate. You have to also locate the maps of different sites, different historical sites in the very first question of your optional paper. Now, that particular question, that particular aspect of your optional paper, it is actually compulsory and mandatory in that way. So, therefore, you need to have a fair idea about the maps, because without maps it is difficult to appreciate the developments of history as well. So, you need to have a fair idea about mapping also in history. Fine, that is one thing. Secondly, similarly in your optional paper 2, you have, let us say, the syllabus of modern India and syllabus of even the world history. So, there also you have the first question, which is equally very compulsory, all right, and that question will be such a sort of like comment type, where you have the questions from of course modern and world history, which would be compulsory for everyone in fact. So, that is how you have to be not very thorough in your preparation, because those questions you can't answer if you have not gone through the syllabus completely. So, only choosing 1 or 2 segments of syllabus will not help you as far as optional paper is concerned in civil service examination. So, it is simple to understand that we have to cover syllabus word by word, and once you cover the syllabus word by word, you will be having a commanding height over the entire syllabus of history. Fine. So, coming back to this issue, that how to approach the syllabus and what is the relevance of understanding the syllabus and how do we understand the syllabus, let me give you that idea very clearly. See, as far as syllabus of ancient India is concerned, now in ancient India syllabus, we have to understand syllabus right from the prehistoric era to the post-Gupta or early medieval period in that way. So, ancient syllabus is comprising of the episodes that actually had been there in India or in the Indian subcontinent right from the prehistoric era. Fine. So, from there only to post-Gupta period, we have to understand the syllabus of ancient India in fact. Fine. Similarly, in medieval India, we have to understand the syllabus right from the post-Gupta period with the emergence of feudalism. So, from the emergence of feudalism to the entry of, you can say, the Islamic invasions or the Arabic invasions in fact, and then Islamic invasions. From that particular episode only, you have to also understand the syllabus of entire medieval India till the decline of the Mughals and the entry of or the advent of the Europeans. So, that is the syllabus of our medieval India. Fine. And then when we enter into the modern India, we see that emergence of the various European powers in India, and not only that, that how they started controlling all the regional powers of India one by one. So, from there only our syllabus of so called modern India starts. Fine. And then of course, the modern India that starts from the entry of the Britishers, or in fact entry of the dominance of Britishers in India, especially from right from the Battle of Plassey to Buxar onwards. So, from here only the modern India also starts as a syllabus, fine. And then we have to give extra emphasis to the development of freedom struggle. So, freedom struggle, especially after the formation of Indian National Congress and especially after the 1857 revolt. So, from there onwards we start entering into the era of freedom struggle, and then finally till 1947 we have to give an extra weightage, extra emphasis upon the syllabus of freedom struggle. So, this is how we have to understand the syllabus of modern India also, fine. Then in post independence, of course, we have to understand the syllabus right from 1947 till 1991 in that way. So, till 1991, however, we can also refer this content till today in that way, but till 1991, because that is one phase of Indian economy or Indian political or historical development that actually happened to be a landmark you can say developments in the past in the history of India. So, that is the reason why in post independence we keep emphasis between 1947 till 1991 developments in India. So, that is the syllabus of post independence for all of us, fine. Similarly in world history. Now, in world history, as far as optional is concerned, now in optional the world history start from the episodes of Renaissance and Reformation itself, alright. That is right from the 15th century onwards the history of world starts as far as our optional paper is concerned. So, definitely you have to study about briefly the background of Renaissance like geographical discoveries, commercial revolutions, etc. And then of course, the Renaissance period and how it actually led to the formation also, and Renaissance Reformation then finally leading to the era of the growth of you can say the exploration to the world, and of course, mercantilism leading to even capitalism in that way. So, era of industrial revolution has to be also understood. So, from Renaissance to the end of the Cold War, that is the wide period, in fact, that is a very huge period you can understand that right from the 15th century till 20th century, in fact, in that way you have to understand the syllabus of this more than in fact 500 to 600 years of syllabus. So, that is actually a part of a syllabus of history, especially in world segment, world history segment for all of us in our optional paper, fine. So, that is one thing that we have to understand as far as the syllabus of optional is concerned, fine. And when we say, I mean many of the words, many of the you can say content and chapters are very specifically mentioned by UPSC in the syllabus itself, fine. So, with the progress of the class, I will tell you exactly how those syllabus are to be are going to be dealt by me in the class itself. But let me introduce the brief idea about history and how to approach history by all of you. So, with this, of course, since you have understood the syllabus in one go, now we have to also understand that what is to be what are we supposed to do in history as far as optional is concerned. See, one thing that obviously in the classes I will take care of everything, every chapter in the class, and most importantly my class lectures would be more than sufficient to handle every aspect of your history. But apart from that also, I will be also supporting my class with some printed material that will be given to you as well in the soft copy. So, with this, of course, your understanding regarding the entire history syllabus would be completed, fine. And I will ensure in the class that nothing is left, no stone is unturned in fact in the class itself on history. And I will ensure that you will be able to answer every question that actually has been asked by UPSC in the last 10 years as far as the history syllabus, history optional is concerned, fine. Now, having said that, the history optional questions these days have become quite tricky, all right, highly tricky, and let me explain to you one of the questions so that you can understand how do we understand the syllabus of history in that way. So, let us say that now you see I am discussing the idea that why history has become quite trickier, especially in optional paper. Suppose I give you one idea that in ancient India, we are supposed to study syllabus right from the prehistoric era to the post Gupta period. Now that is the span of our syllabus of ancient India in that way. Fine. Now you can understand this prehistoric era that we have to largely understand. It actually begins right from the era of Paleolithic phase itself. Alright, so Paleolithic era, that is of course the Stone Age era I am talking about. So Stone Age era, so old Stone Age era basically. So this old Stone Age era that we have to understand right from this particular period to, you can understand that after that we have to understand even the Mesolithic era, even the Neolithic era. So we have to understand these all eras and their development in our material culture of Indian society. All right, that is what we have to understand from this particular point only. And then when we enter into the so-called historic era, that is basically beginning of the Chalcolithic phase. So Chalcolithic era, that is understood to be the era that has begun in India somewhere around 9,000 to 8,000 BCE. So that is from here onwards we see the Chalcolithic era has begun in India, and then finally you see the era of the Bronze Age in India. Era of the Bronze Age in India, that is precisely from, let's say, 4,500 BCE onwards in fact. Alright, 4,500 BC onwards we see the Bronze era has begun, alright, across the world, but in India it was specifically somewhere around, let's say, 3,000 BCE. That is how in India we see the emergence of Bronze Age era. So the idea was, see, these all aspect that we study, now this aspect is a part of our prehistoric era phase. Fine, this Bronze Age era is a part of proto-historic era phase. Fine, and then of course after this the beginning of around 1500 BCE, the Vedic era, which is understood to be the era of history in India. Now see, this is how history is classified, that is prehistoric era, proto-historic era and historic era. Why this classification is there? It is all due to that this era, which is also called as Pragaitik Kal, alright, in Hindi. So this prehistoric era is that era where the art of writing was not in existence. So people out there, the early man in India or in Indian subcontinent, having no idea how to go for the art of writing, how to actually have an art of writing. So since they lack the art of writing, so therefore this era is actually understood to be the era of prehistoric period. Then this proto-historic era. The proto-historic era is that era where when you actually understood it, whether you understood it in the context of that people were having the art of writing. They knew how to express themselves in some letters, in some script, but unfortunately that script or that letter have not been able to be deciphered by the scholars, by the historians till now, and therefore this era is actually referred as the era of proto-historic era. Fine. Now the history that we say or that we refer as a history, so history is an era that is understood to be the era when we have the evidences of the art of writing, and we come to know about that particular phase of history of India through some art of writing. some written sources, some literary sources. So therefore, that era is understood to be the era of history of India. Now, this is how we understand history of India. Fine. But the questions, if you see, these questions which are asked by UPSC, especially in the main examination, it has become quite trickier. Now, why quite trickier? Because they are not asking very simple questions. The way it is asked in other examinations, for example, let's say in BPSC, they'll ask you that critically examine the emergence of Harappa as an urban center or urban planning. Was urban planning followed in Harappa or not? So, what kind of urban planning was there in the time of Harappa? Now, such kind of questions can be asked you in BPSC for sure, but of course in UPSC perhaps such kind of straightforward question will not be asked to you. Alright, they'll ask you that what all factors that contributed in the rise of urban culture of Harappa and how that urban culture Harappa happened to be one distinct culture across the world at that particular point of time. So, in other words, you do not need to know that how urban culture has developed in Harappa, but rather you also have to go for a comparative study of the Harappan urban culture with the other urban cultures of the world. So, you need to know also about the cultures of, let's say, Mesopotamia, the cultures of, let's say, Egyptian, the culture of, let's say, the other part of the world, so that you can compare those cultures with the Harappan urban culture. So, that is how you need to understand that this is the kind of question how UPSC frames the question for all of us, in fact, in that way. I will simply discuss one small example before all of you. See, the question that was asked by UPSC, especially in one of the years, that was on sources. Suppose sources is one of the most important aspect of history. I mean, sources, especially in the context of the literary source, that is the written source or the textbook or the written material that we have, all right, in form of even the you can say the epigraphy, etc. So, of course, the written sources happen to be one of the most credible source to reconstruct the history of any part of India. Simply, that written sources are also supported by even the archaeological sources, and that actually gives us the more concrete understanding about history of India. So, archaeological sources are equally very prominent source to understand that. So, what kind of questions UPSC will ask you, rather already has asked you? They will ask you questions like that it is ironical that the Harappan civilization or the history of Harappa have been reconstructed on the basis of archaeological sources, whereas history of the Vedic era has been reconstructed on the basis of the literary sources. But neither Harappa has been corroborated by the literary sources, nor Vedic era has been corroborated by the archaeological sources. So, simply discuss this dichotomy. Why is it so? Now, you need to understand, I mean, of course, such kind of questions will be asked to you, and answers of these questions are not given in there in any of the book. Let me tell you one thing. So, you will not find a book where the answers are written in this particular order. Actually, you need to understand the entire episodes of history in a very meticulous manner, and then you have to also apply your mind, your sense over that particular understanding. Alright, so once you go through, let's say, Harappa, when you go through even, let's say, Vedic period, you need to know that what all sources that we have, because without sources we cannot let's say narrate the entire history. So, for history, sources are the most important fuel to run this particular system of or engine of history. So, if you don't have the source, the engine of history will not run. Alright. So, therefore, sources are just like fuel for the engine of history for all of us. So, in that way, you need to understand, when you go through Harappa and Harappan period, you will find that yes, we have the archaeological sources, but unfortunately, we are not having the literary sources to corroborate our understanding of Harappan civilization. The same logic goes in the case of the Vedic period, because we have the good number of Vedic texts or the text written after even the Vedic period, but that narrates this episode of Vedic period. We have good number of those Vedic texts that give us the understanding about the society, culture, economy, political aspect of the Vedic period, but unfortunately, we do not have the kind of archaeological sources that we have been able to discover in the context of the Harappans. So, that is the dichotomy of in history. Explain this dichotomy. So, such kind of questions will be asked to you. Similarly, they had asked you a very interesting question, let's say in 2016 mains examination, they had asked you examine the relationship among the economic growth, urbanization and state formation from 7th century BCE to 3rd century BCE. See, I mean, how intricately they have asked you a question. Again, I am repeating the question. In 2016 main examination, I am taking some sample question to make you understand how questions have become quite trickier. Therefore, you need a very proficient mentor, guide or teacher to guide you on history. Otherwise, you can study history from NCERT, from X and YZ books, from X and YZ material also that is available in the market, but perhaps you will not be able to develop that understanding which is required to actually answer, of course, very substantially there in your optional paper of history. So, that is the reason why you need a mentor or you need a guide, you need a teacher who has not only studied history, but also who has written the various mains examination, appear for the interviews through history only. So, those people will be able to guide you on a proper track. All right. So, therefore, here we have to understand that we have to understand history not from the academics perspective, but also its application perspective that is required there in UPSC examination. Fine. So, in 2016 mains examination, a question was asked that was examine the relationship between the economic growth, urbanization, all right, examine the relationship between economic growth, urbanization and state formation. From 7th century BCE to 3rd century BCE. Now, see, this was a question asked by UPSC in your optional paper in 2016 mains examination. Now, why I have chosen, there are many questions that I can choose, but I have chosen this question to make you understand that you will not be able to do justice with this question if you have no idea about the chronological development of events that have undertaken place in the history of India. All right. So, that therefore, I have taken up this particular question before all of you to make you understand that how do we understand this particular issue of the relationship between economic growth, urbanization and state formation. Fine. Now, see, in one way I will explain to you like this way, economic growth. Now, what is economic growth? See, economic growth is all about two things. One, that the production of the goods have increased, all right. That is one aspect of economic growth, that it has increased. Second, that this production of goods that have increased also has increased the exchange of goods, from one place to another place. In other words, it has given a boost to export import of goods from one place to another place. Fine. So, that is how economic growth is understood to be. Fine. Now, see, once you go for this, or rather once you have achieved this, obviously the production of goods, exchange of goods, export import will give a boost to the kind of urban centers developed in India. So, it will give a boost to urban centers. Why? Because the goods which are produced largely of course I talk about the merchandise goods. Merchandise goods, all right, merchandise goods could be, let's say, textile, potteries, all right, jewelries, so etc. I mean, there are a lot of goods which can be produced in any society. So these goods were produced. So to these goods which are produced, these goods are used largely in a particular class of society which do not have time to, let's say, manufacture the same goods back at their home. All right, so people are also in that profession where they do not have time to produce all these goods. So what will they do? They will try to purchase these goods. So in other words, production of goods must have also given the boost to the concept of monetization of economy. Monetization of economy means exchange of goods and services in lieu of money. So use of money must have increased at some point of time in India. For example, 7th century BCE. This is the time when it is said that India has seen the introduction of a very important coin. It is called as punch-marked coins. Punch-marked coin. That's the first coin found in Indian subcontinent which was introduced in lieu of the exchange of goods. Earlier, it was a barter system that was basically followed. In a barter system, what happens? That you take some good from me, I'll take some good from you. That is a barter system. All right. But for the first time, you see the exchange of coins, use of coins were done for conducting any trade and commerce. So see, 7th century BC was the same particular point of time. So why it actually increased? Because of that there was some class of people apart from agriculturists who were involved in the exchange of goods and services. So they needed money in lieu of their services, in lieu of their work. So of course, the use of money has increased tremendously with the economic growth in 7th century BC onwards. Fine. With this, of course, those people who were engaged in the exchange of goods, production of goods, art and craft, etc., they all were not living in the villages. So they started moving towards, they started creating the urban centers where mainly the industrial workhouses, the industrial products were to be produced. So the finished products, the finished merchandise products were to be produced, and for that they needed a particular station, a particular area where all the laborers could have been, of course, assembled, could have been engaged to produce XYZ product at that particular point of time. So in this process, it also gave a boost to the concept of urban centers. So you see, emergence of urban centers took place because of these all factors. So 1, 2, even 3, this is the factor. So these 3 factors led to the emergence of urban centers. And when in urban centers, there were multiple urban centers started coming up in India, in ancient India. Of course, in between the urban centers, there was regular exchange of goods and trade started happening. So trade and commerce got a boost because of this emergence of urban centers. Now this trade and commerce could not have been increased, could not have been promoted without actually ensuring a proper law and order in the society. Because of course, we are talking about the Indian subcontinent, especially of 6th, 7th century BCE. So in that BCE, it was equally very important to understand that there are various kind of threats from the let's say wild animals, from the other tribal cultures, from the other people also. So there were regular wars, there were regular battles also being fought between the two communities, the two clans, or two, you can say, group or two tribes altogether. So to have better law and order, to provide them security, you also needed state. You also needed someone who can provide you the security or protection. So for that, what you did, you started in fact conceiving the concept of, let's say, a monarchy, and this monarchy was running the entire state. All right. So what we got the formation of state also. State means that, of course, there has to be a ruler, and along with the ruler, there is a system of bureaucracy, system of defense, system of army, system of ministers who could regulate, who could look after all these affairs in this given society. So what you see, it finally started linking also towards the emergence of state in India by the 6th century BCE itself. Alright, and what do we find? We find that two kinds of states got emerged in India by the 6th century BCE itself. One was definitely the monarchical form of government got emerged in India. Alright, monarchical form of governments got emerged in India, which we call it as Mahajanpadas. Fine, so Mahajanpadas got emerged in India, especially in the 6th century BCE around. And then you also have got the emergence of Gansanghas in 6th century BC around. So you see, two type of political setup emerged. One was a monarch was controlling the entire affairs, all right, and under the monarchy there was a system of bureaucracy, ministers, army, other staffs, all right. So that system got emerged in the form of the Mahajanpadas, fine. And then there was also a parallel system where you see there was a group of elite people who were providing the law and order, who were providing the facilities of a state. So it was not a monarchical form of government, pure monarchical form of government. It was basically a government run by a group of people. So group of people, they used to run the government together. So it is also understood to be the foundation of the republic in India. Alright, so republic concept was given by India only, earliest in the world in that way. So you see Gansanghas also emerged in India at the same particular point of time. Fine. And then it is saying that from 7th century to 3rd century BC, you have to understand it. So Gansanghas, Mahajanpadas emerged by the 6th century BC itself, which was also a period of Lord Buddha and Lord Mahavira. So by the time of Lord Buddha emerged, or rather Lord Buddha started propagating or preaching his ideas, there were already the existence of the Mahajanpadas and also the Gansanghas. Now in this particular battle of the two different kind of political system, finally a Mahajanpadas emerged as the most powerful Mahajanpada, which is called as the Magad or the Magadhan Empire. So see, Magadhan Empire finally emerged as the most powerful empire. By the 3rd century BCE, Magadhan Empire had turned out to be the Mauryan Empire in that way. So you see, Mauryan Empire had derived its lineage from the Magadhan Empire, because the Magadhan Empire that was already established by the 6th century BCE, or the Magadhan kingdom, I would say, not empire. Empire actually was developed only in the era of Nandas and the early Mauryas, but it was Magadhan kingdom initially. So the Magadhan kingdom had already emerged as the powerful kingdom under leadership of Bimbisar and Ajatasattu. So now you see Bimbisar, Ajatasattu, which were also contemporary to Lord Buddha and Mahavira. So they were the most powerful kings of that particular era. Fine. And they provided the base to convert this Magadhan kingdom into an empire by the time of Mahapadmanand itself. Alright. So Mahapadmanand, when he acquired the throne of the Magadhan kingdom, he made it as an empire because he conquered vast area right from Odisha to almost entire UP in that way. So he provided that particular base, and then finally how from Nanda dynasty, from Dhananand, Chandragupta Maurya along with Chanakya, he overtook the control of the Magadhan empire, and he then converted it into the so-called great modern empire of ancient India. And by the time when Ashoka came into picture, because this was the time of Ashoka, 3rd century BC, Ashoka came into picture, already the so-called modern empire had achieved its climax of its control. So right from Afghanistan to entire, you can say area of Bangladesh of today, right from the area of till Karnataka and Mysore today, this entire area was under the command of one particular centralized empire, and that was the Mauryan Empire under Ashoka. Alright. That is the development. Now see, this was supposed to be written in this particular question. So you had to examine the relationship between or among the economic growth, urbanization and state formation. Because urbanization provided a very strong logic to state formation. How? Because in the urban areas, when the trade and commerce started increasing, it not only needed to provide a law and order, but also it started giving a huge amount of taxes. Huge amount of taxes to whom? To the authority, to the state. With the tax only, the state became very powerful, because money is always very important for any state. So they became very powerful, and the area where the more and more trade and commerce was to be conducted, or it was conducted, that became more powerful because of the collection of huge amount of revenue in the form of taxes. For example, Magad kingdom. So why Magad kingdom became so powerful? Because in the Magad, they promoted trade and commerce across the Magadhan territory, and that is precisely the reason at why they became not only powerful, but also they were having a rivalry with the Gansanghas. Alright, so the Vajji confederacy, they were not in support of this trade and commerce, because they were inward looking people. So therefore, the Magadhan kingdom had a struggle, had a fight, or rather had a rivalry with these sort of Gansanghas, and finally they were successful in eliminating all these Gansanghas and finally merging these areas under the Magadhan empire or Magadhan kingdom only. So that is the history in fact, or that is the history in fact. So see, I mean, this you cannot write an answer with all the substantial points if you have no fair idea about the history of ancient India in that particular order, where you can relate the things with each other. Because this was a question where you have to understand three concepts separately: economic growth, urbanization, state formation. So if you don't know how economic growth takes place, if you don't know how urbanization takes place, we don't know what is the base for state formation, you will not be able to do justice with this particular question. Alright. So this is how you have to understand this particular question. Fine. So exactly in the class, we will be doing all these exercises as well. Fine. I will take one more sample question for all of you, alright, in my next video. So till here, we will keep it short and crispy, so that you can understand what we have discussed as far as our optional paper is concerned. I will come with another video where I will discuss the syllabus of GS, specifically of history, and also a few of the questions of GS belonging to history section, history and culture section, in my next video. Okay. Thank you then. See you. Bye bye. Take care.